Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Okay, I think we're doing good.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It is my privilege to introduce Joe Kipley. He is a native of South Dakota. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Notre Dame, his Juris Doctor from the University of South Dakota, and a master's in health administration from the University of Iowa. Oh boy. Mr. Kipley has continued his public service by serving as the public health director for the city of Sioux Falls and also as a Minnehaha County Commissioner. He served as a U.S. Senate page from September 4th, 2001 to January 18th of 2002. He is the author of A Page in History, which recounts his story and the story of his Senate page class during this important time in our nation's history. A Page in History is a story of courage, faith, and the resolve to defeat terror. Mr. Kipley, the floor is yours.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you, Kim. And so Kim is usually behind the scenes taking the minutes for us at the Minnehaha County Commission. So it was good to see her front and center doing the introduction. And then when Kim invited me to talk with you all, she gave me the date, and I said, oh, well, I'm out of town Easter weekend, but I'm back. So yeah, that's going to work. And then I thought it through. My second thought was, right after the resurrection, this is going to be a tough act to follow. So for you guys coming over from church, Jesus is always a tough act to follow, but we try to follow him as best we can. So yeah, this is definitely a great group to speak with, because some of the things that I experienced when I was 16 and 17-year-old in Washington, D.C. were very faith formative. So we can obviously talk about some of those things and do some Q&A. But I kind of want to just give you an overview of my page experience, and we can just have a discussion. And I brought enough copies for everybody in the group here, so you can walk away with a copy and read deeper and share with your colleagues and friends in the community. But when I was first giving these discussions, it felt like a current event talk, and now it's more like a history talk. And so times change, and the politics change, and foreign affairs, and the world, and terrorism. But time marches on. So now I've got a 5-year-old and 7-year-old little girls myself, and that was one of the reasons that I wrote the book. Was I kept a journal while I was a Senate page, and I kind of wanted to just get it down and document it as a historical document for my own family, if nothing else. But I grew up in Brookings, and then in 8th or 9th grade, I went out to Washington, D.C. on just a family vacation trip, and we got a tour. I think it was through Senator Daschle's office. At that time, we would have had Senator Daschle, Senator Tim Johnson, and Representative John Thune. So again, some of those things change over time. Now, Senator John Thune is the leader of the Senate. So that's kind of fun how well South Dakota has been represented. But I saw the Senate floor was not in session, so we got a tour there, and we kind of got to learn about what pages were, and I kind of had that in the back of my mind. I'd like to do that someday. And so I applied through Senator Daschle's office. He was Senate Majority Leader at the time, so he could pick as many pages as he wanted. He basically ran the Senate. So there's 30 pages from all over the country, but there were 3 of us from South Dakota, so much disproportionate to we're not 10% of the population of the United States, obviously. So Senator Daschle obviously got more than the fair share. So we had a friend of mine from Wilmot, South Dakota, Jason Frericks, actually served in the state legislature. So he's went on to some public service. And then Katie Rudebush was from Rapid City, and I was from Brookings. So we kind of had South Dakota covered. And we started on September 4th, 2001. So we had about 1 week of normalcy, and then obviously you know what happened on September 11th. But our job as Senate pages, we're all juniors in high school, so it was our fall semester of our junior year, and so we went to a school in our dormitory about 4 blocks away from the U.S. Capitol building, just adjacent to one of the Senate office buildings, actually where Senator Daschle's office was. It was the Hart Senate office building. And so we would walk each morning. We would wake up very early, so this instilled some discipline in me, which was good for me. We'd wake up, and our school would start at 6 a.m. each morning. So we'd try to get a school day in before going on to the Senate to set up for that day's work. So we had only 4 classes. So we had a social studies, a science, an English, and a math class. And there were a couple sections of each. They'd try to tailor it back to your home school. So what I was taking in Brookings High School, what level of algebra and what type of literature class and what level of science, those types of things. And so we'd have 4 classes, and then we'd be off to the Capitol building, walking through the Hart building, and then on a tram underneath, underground, and to the U.S. Capitol building. And then the job of a page is basically kind of a glorified errand person for our 100 bosses. Kim thinks it's bad she has 5 bosses with county commissioners. I had 100 bosses with the U.S. Senate. But then since I was selected by a Democratic Party member, Senator Tom Daschle, I sat on the Democratic side, and it was a very evenly divided Senate back then. If you recall, it was actually a 50-50 Senate, and then a Republican member, Jim Jeffords from Vermont, actually switched parties and gave Senator Daschle the majority. So it's basically a 51-59, very even Senate, but it was kind of fun to I'm a Republican, kind of a traditional conservative, Reagan Republican by background, but it was really good for me to sit on the Democratic side. It kind of built in this institutional bipartisanship that we're all on the same team. And during the fall of 2001, we really felt that we were all on the same team as Americans. And then I had friends that were Democrats, but they were selected by a Republican senator in their home state. So we kind of had this, it made for good discussions and just a good growing experience in your kind of political knowledge as a young person. But you'd get there in the morning and you'd check in the cloakroom. So I'd check in the Democratic cloakroom. There you could hang up your backpack and your things because you do your schoolwork, your homework on breaks from your job. But you were an employee of the U.S. Senate as a page. And you'd get the chamber set up for the day. You'd put a copy of the congressional record from the day prior on every desk as if the senators are going to come in and read it, but kind of almost probably more for show than anything. And then as a senator would come in during the day, you'd get them a glass of water. There was a cheat sheet of each senator liked their glass of water a different way. Some with Senator Daschle always wanted ice in his water, whereas his assistant, Senator Harry Reid, wanted no ice. And you'd remember some of these things, but you always had a list in the cloakroom, and you'd run back, get an errand. They had different lecterns, so like this, like a little podium to put on their desk, and some senators were shorter, like Patty Murray from Washington is very, very short, and she would want a short lectern. And then Senator John Kerry from Massachusetts was a taller guy, so he'd need a taller lectern, and there'd be kind of a code. Senators would come in and say, hey, I need my lectern, and you'd go back into a lobby area and get their lectern. So there's all this just errands running, and another fun thing would be you'd start the day with the Pledge of Allegiance and prayer by the chaplain, and that would be led by the presiding officer. And at that time in 2001, Senator Hillary Clinton was a junior senator from New York. So she drew the short straw frequently and had to preside over the Senate, because that's kind of just a waste of time. You're sitting in a mainly empty chamber just presiding over things. But she, a former first lady, would have to take her turn doing that. And so that was kind of one of my highlights in the first weeks, was getting to see, this basically there's these celebrities in the political world, and you'd get to push her chair in as helping her sit down and get it started. And so those were some of the things in my first week that I thought, this is going to be the highlight of my time as a page. It's September 4th or 5th, and I saw John McCain in the elevator, or rode the elevator with this senator. And we went to a joint session where a foreign dignitary, the president of Mexico, came and talked to a joint session of Congress in that first week. And I thought, maybe this is going to be the highlight of my whole time here. You got to embrace these moments while you have them. But then it turned out the real heart of the story that I want to tell you about are the dates September 10th, 11th, and 12th. And as you can imagine, those were some pivotal days for us. But on September 10th, we were a new set of pages, so some of the senators were aware of that and were kind of pulling us aside to kind of humanize the institution and give us assurances as we're kind of just deer in the headlights, young kids trying to figure out what we're supposed to be doing. But Senator Robert Byrd was a senior Democratic senator from West Virginia, and he kind of just an old lion of the institution, had been around forever, and he gaggled us up together in kind of a semicircle around him on September 10th, and that date sticks with me because he had some different kind of almost fables he was telling us. He was just kind of imparting certain wisdom and sharing things with us. But he had us in a semicircle, and I was standing right next to him, and he used my head as a prop because he said, our minds are finite, whereas God's is infinite. And so he knocked on my head. So apparently he picked me out as the most finite, apparently. Anyway, but he was trying to instill in us kind of a sense of humility. He had been telling kind of some stories and fables that were kind of quasi-biblical and with moral lessons to them, and he was trying to impart that upon us. But what stuck with me there was just, it was a great message of faith, because we often talk in kind of theological terms, the problem of evil. How do bad things happen? How does evil exist when we know God is all good and all powerful? God has the power to stop a terrorist attack like September 11th, but didn't for some reason. So how do we deal with that? And we talk about free will and how we can choose evil or we can choose good. And so you can kind of go down that theological framework, but just knowing that we might never understand that. Again, our minds are finite, but God is infinite. And so that was the lesson and kind of my foundational that kind of felt like a higher power sent me a United States Senator that day to tell me a theological message that what's going to be happening in the next few days you might never understand, but it's going to be important, and you have to keep moving forward and trust that God has some grander plan. So that was September 10th, kind of a test of faith, or planting a seed of faith. And then on September 11th was kind of a test of resolve, of just how do you even get through that day. And everybody remembers that day and where they were that day, kind of one of those generational moments where we all are kind of imprinted the timestamp of the morning of September 11th. So I woke up that day, though, of course, in Washington, D.C. It was a day just like any other. I was getting into a little bit of a routine. I was 1 week into this. I'm a veteran by now. So September 4th we started. September 11th, another Tuesday, just like any other day. So I would have went to school. It was a beautiful day. We would have walked to the Hart Building and then took the tram again to the Capitol Building and started our day of work. I vividly remember walking into the cloakroom to, again, hang up my items and kind of get organized for the day, and I walked in and there was a television that showed a plane hitting the building. And what that turned out to be, we thought it was maybe a replay of something, but that was actually the second plane hitting. And so then that's when the chatter around the Capitol building went from, hey, did you hear about this kind of freak accident of one plane, maybe a small plane hitting a building in a different city, so not really directly affecting us yet, to, okay, 2 planes, how does that even work? That can't be a coincidence. Is this an attack? And so, again, 16, 17-year-old kids were confused, and we're just told to keep going about our day as best we can. But then when the Pentagon is hit, that's just a few miles to the southeast of where we are in the District of Columbia into Virginia, technically. But that was too close for comfort for the Capitol Police, and they obviously saw that America was under attack. This wasn't some isolated accident. It was obviously intentional and obviously not geographically confined. So the Capitol building is at risk. So they gathered us in the cloakroom and said, we're evacuating the building. And so we ran down the stairs to the main floor, and then what I'll never forget, and it reminds me of my grandfather now, who has since passed, but he was a big baseball coach, big baseball influence in me. And I'll never forget, there was a Capitol police officer that reminded me of a third base coach, winding you home and basically, encouraging you to hurry and rush. There was a sense of urgency as if the Capitol building was under imminent threat. It wasn't just like a fire drill. Everyone, single file, just walk out of the building and this will all be fine and we'll come back in a few minutes. It was get out of here. So that image sticks with me too, of just the Capitol police officer telling you to get out as quickly as possible, and this feeling of when you broke the threshold, you got out of the building. It was like you expected it to blow up behind you. Like it was this kind of action. You felt like you were in a movie. Like this is so surreal. But then you look to the south there, and you see the smoke rising from the Pentagon. And it's no longer just an image on TV that these different buildings are being hit and there's smoke and there's debris, but you can actually see it with your own eyes as an eyewitness that there's this. And then you see planes still in the air that you don't know what's going on. Are they being used to be attacking, or are they trying to land? What is going on? So mass confusion. And again, the other context for this story is we're all 16-year-old juniors in high school, and we have actually never walked from the Capitol building to our dormitory. We've always stopped in an office building and then taken an underground tramway. So we don't really know where we're going. And it's kind of chaos, and we don't have kind of that adult supervision that we normally have, at our school dormitory building or in the Capitol. We're junior employees, and we have other adults overlooking us. But we were basically just told, get out of here, and there wasn't really anyone shepherding us. So I'm very proud of a fellow colleague from South Dakota, Jason Frericks, kind of took a group of us and he says, I think I know the way. And I'm like, he's a farm kid from South Dakota. I think he knows the way. I'm a city slicker from Brookings, so I just followed him. But we found our way. We had our general bearings, but we just kind of, and then there's other rumors going on of, is there a car bomb at the Supreme Court, and is there this? And so there was, now in perfect hindsight, over 20 years later, we can all kind of say, yep, there were 4 planes that day, and we kind of know what it was. But in the moment, it's just the unknown. You don't know what's coming next, and is the attack over, or is it just beginning? And that was kind of the whole rest of my time as a page. Was September 11th an isolated attack, or is it just beginning? So it took a lot of resolve to get through that day, and probably my closest to breaking point was we get back to the dormitory, and again, many of you remember these days, the days before cell phones. So I didn't have a cell phone to call my mom back in Brookings, but obviously she's watching this unfold and is a worried mom, but all of us are queuing up, lining up for a landline phone in our school. So I think I was in my English class. Anyway, so we're all just in our basement of our dormitory, which then is our school, and we're all kind of taking turns with a phone. And I remember kind of being stiff upper lip, like just the facts, Mom. Here's what's going on. I'm okay. We're gonna figure it out. The school and our proctors will take care of us. We didn't know then if we were going to evacuate out of D.C. or we were going to stay where we were, but we were okay. Was the main thing. And my mom was surprisingly stiff upper lip, just the facts and whatnot. And then we would talk later that each of us were about to break, because when you hear that familiar voice, it's one thing to be trying to grow up, be a big kid, your first week in a big city, but then when you're in a crisis mode and you hear your mom's voice, there's something special about that that gets you. But then I had to let other people make phone calls, and then I remember vividly, I was actually over in my social studies room, so the room I was taking U.S. history class, and we were watching a television, and the towers collapsed. And that's where you could just sense, a lot of people lost their life in that moment, and so that weighs heavy on you. And then at some point we would later learn, I think it was actually later in the day, but we would learn that there was a 4th plane, and I'm fairly convinced that plane was headed towards Washington, D.C., headed towards the highest point, biggest target in Washington, D.C., the symbol of our democracy, the Capitol building. So symbol of our democracy, a symbol of our military strength, the Pentagon, and a symbol of our economic might, the World Trade Centers. So I mean, obviously a coordinated attack on symbols of America, and so there's some element of, sometimes we talk about things like survivor's guilt, like that you were in a building that, what if that had been the building that was the first plane of the day? And then, so sometimes you kind of wrap around in your head, what if? And so obviously my whole page class and everybody in the Capitol building that day thinks very highly of the passengers of Flight 93 that fought to get that plane back during the day, September 11th, and fought their best to take it over, and it crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So those will forever be heroes, and kind of a mantra for me to this day is Todd Beamer was a passenger on that flight, and his statement would be on a phone call to trying to get help and get information, he had kind of gathered a group of men to attack and said, let's roll. And so kind of that idea is kind of an iconic American spirit of let's move forward, let's try something. We're not going to just sit here and do nothing and let these terrorists win. So that was kind of a driving spirit even before we knew who Todd Beamer was, but that was kind of a sense for my page class that we're gonna do what we can and play our very small role in the federal government, but that's going to be part of the response of the United States to stand up to terrorism. So later in the day, September 11th, we do decide to evacuate to Maryland, to a hotel for the night, because again, just the rumor mill, and is this just the beginning? Washington, D.C. doesn't sound like a great place to be. It's basically got one big bullseye on it as a symbol of our government. So we went and spent the night in a hotel in Maryland, and there were 4 of us per room, so in our dormitory. So I had 3 male roommates from all across the nation. That was a great experience to learn from people from other places. So I had a couple people from the Deep South and one from Detroit, Michigan, and so we were all in this room together. Then so we got assigned to the room together in our hotel room. And we were at the very end of a hallway, and so we took over one whole hallway of a hotel, and this proctor that was kind of in charge of our program and just keeping track of us and in charge of our dormitory, he was clearly going down and checking in on everyone, kind of night check to make sure we were all in bed and if we had any questions or concerns. And he got to our room, and so we knew we were at the end of the hallway, so we knew we were the last ones he was checking in on, and he had a question for us. He said, the Senate, Senator Daschle, and then Speaker Denny Hastert was the House Speaker, so they want to bring Congress back into session the next day again, back to kind of this spirit of let's roll, let's get back in session. So Senator Daschle wants to bring us back to just show that we're not going to shut down our whole world. We're going to keep the functions of our democracy going. So we need pages. We're considered kind of necessary employees or functional of how the Senate works to keep it running. So we need volunteers. And so Jay Wright, my friend from Alabama, he just said, I'll go back. And I guess I don't know, I was just following his lead again, kind of like my farmer from South Dakota. When somebody had a good idea that I thought was right, I was willing to step up too. And then our 3rd and 4th roommate, we all volunteered. So there's 4 of us going back tomorrow, September 12th. And this proctor just thanked us profusely. And then that got me to thinking, wait, were we the only ones in the whole hallway that are crazy enough to go back to the Capitol building on September 12th, 2001? And he said, so we legitimately asked that question, like, are we crazy here? Like, help us out. You're an adult. We're 16. Is this a wrong decision? And he said, no, virtually everyone had volunteered. There were a couple gals that wanted to stay home back at the dormitory one day, and then we were back in full force September 13th. But that was that spirit of this group, and in some ways it's comparable, and in some ways it's completely different, but for another generation it was kind of our Pearl Harbor day, and you wanted to go down to the enlistment shop the next day, and that was kind of the mentality. And we did have a few members of my page class that went on to military service from this grounding of an experience. But so that was kind of our test of resolve on September 11th, and then it took courage on September 12th to actually get on that bus and to go and to enter into this Senate chamber where you didn't know what was going to happen. Again, September 11th, in hindsight, we know that it was kind of confined to that one day, but everyone was a little skittish in the days that followed of is there something, what's the next shoe to drop? But September 12th and 13th basically were just all 100 senators taking turns condemning the attacks and kind of giving their vantage point on it. But it started with senators like Chuck Schumer, who is now a Senate Democratic leader, and Hillary Clinton, the then junior senator from New York, because obviously New York was the most affected, and then senators from Virginia, Senator Warner and Allen from Virginia. They spoke kind of on behalf of the Pentagon population in Virginia. And then Senator Daschle actually led off as the Senate leader. But over those 2 days, the one that I remember the most was Senator McCain. He was a badass. He was a tough guy. And he would walk around the Senate, and he had he had the tight walk of he had been tortured in Vietnam, and so he had another generation's battle that it fought on behalf of the United States and group of veterans. He kind of just embodied that, and when he went in and out of the doors of the Senate, he couldn't raise his arm all the way to open the door, and he was just very gruff. And at one point, I remember talking to a Page classmate of mine that we just got to send him alone over to Afghanistan. He'll take everybody. Like, he was just a tough guy. So I just admired him a lot. But he said, I remember being actually out in the lobby working on my homework. We would kind of sit in the Senate lobby just off the Senate chamber. Half of us Pages would be on duty and half would be doing homework or doing other tasks or resting, taking a lunch break, etc. But I remember the door swung open at the exact time he said this line was, "May God have mercy on these terrorists, because we will not." And it was kind of like when he said it, he meant it. Like, basically, it was a call to war. Like, we were going to take some kind of military force to Afghanistan and to the Taliban for harboring al-Qaeda. And again, these were terms Americans were just learning for the first time. We didn't really know much about the Taliban. What is that? Could barely find Afghanistan on a map. Al-Qaeda, what is that word? There were transcriptionists that sit there and type up all the senators' speeches. And, how do you spell Al-Qaeda? That was like, we would take messages around the Capitol and we had the words Al-Qaeda on a whiteboard for what was the confirmed spelling of it. Like, just the terminology and things that we were learning in the fall of 2001, just different cultures, different geography, different military methods, everything was coming together there in the fall of 2001. What were the options? What were we going to do next? And then on September 13th was my 17th birthday. And as a birthday gift, I got there was a package that was left unattended, and we all know what that means now. So that turned into, was that a bomb threat to the Capitol? And so we had to evacuate on my September 13th, my 17th birthday. And so I was actually down in the subway system. They were in the middle of a vote, and Senate Pages kind of check everyone's names off that they're on their way, because sometimes the biggest thing during a vote is like, where is, Senator Kerry from Massachusetts? Oh, nope, I just saw him get off the tram. He's on his way. Just hold the vote for 5 more minutes. He'll be there. And so I was checking that list, and I had another page that was down there with me, and they were telling us all to evacuate. We saw people running down the stairs towards the tram. So this was like deja vu all over again, like an evacuation, what's going on? And this, I didn't have any of my buddies with me really, or we were all evacuating together. We had to evacuate, but then a Senate Page turned to me and said, "There's Senator Carl Levin from Michigan. He's the chair of Armed Services. He doesn't look afraid. I don't think we should be afraid either." And it was just kind of light moments like that of like, hey, what are you going to do? There's Capitol Police taking care of people that are way more important than us, and they're being just diligent about it, and let's just go with them. So it was Carl Levin and then Senator Rick Santorum from Pennsylvania, and they kind of escorted us / escorted each other out into the park outside the Senate Russell office building, where Ted Kennedy was out there playing with his dog. So this one was a little bit less intense than September 11th. So we kind of all knew it was a false alarm of some kind, and they just needed to give us the clear to come back in. But Senator Santorum made sure we got the couple of us that were down in the subway system got back to the rest of our Page class. And so it was moments like that senators were real people and were helping us, and kind of knew that there were high school kids that needed a little extra attention. And then about a week later, we had the address from President Bush. And that was Lisa Beamer, Todd Beamer's wife, was in the audience. And so we kind of got that first reference to Todd Beamer and the Flight 93 story, and we're in the House chamber that could have been destroyed by a plane if not for Todd Beamer and his passenger mates. And that started to hit home for us. Like, this is real world, and this is the President of the United States. The President of the United States had a famous moment with Senator Tom Daschle where they embraced and kind of showed Democrats and Republicans we need to get along during this time. That would later be used against both of them, because that's just the world we live in, and we kind of relate to that polarized politics today a little bit more, that we wouldn't expect the current president to be hugging a Democrat and vice versa. So that's just the world we live in now. But then it was seen as completely appropriate and up to the moment, and that both of these guys wanted to move the country forward. And so President Bush had a speech that basically laid out the framework that we're going to go to war in Afghanistan, and we're going to respond to these attacks. And so you'd think we could settle in as pages, okay? It's a war footing, but there's been pages during World War II, during Vietnam, there's wars going on, but we can be Senate pages, and the rest of our semester as a page will be normal. Well, then that's when the anthrax attacks came. So if you recall, October 2001, Senator Daschle's Hart office building got a letter in the mail. That was not a job of the pages to open mail, luckily, but that was in their Senate office building staff, and we would run errands to that office building and deliver messages and whatnot, but we weren't the mail sorters and whatnot. But they still had us take ciprofloxacin, like a strong antibiotic, and as a precaution. I also remember Senator Bill Frist was a Republican from Tennessee, and he was a medical doctor. And so he sat down all the pages at one point and said, I know how this works, and this is just a precaution. Like, you guys don't need to be worried that you're at this point infected with anthrax, but we have to just have everybody take this medication. And so, again, another trusted source that you feel comfortable with the situation. But I did have one friend that was in Senator Daschle's office that day, and so she had to take the antibiotics for longer and was having side effects, and so that it was just not a fun situation for anybody. And then it was kind of a sign of the times. You'd get mail from home, and it would be, after the anthrax, it would be irradiated. The post offices would cut a slit in the corner so that any powder would drop off, and then they would irradiate the mail. So it had a kind of a yellow tinge to it. And so getting letters from home, from Brookings, you'd have kind of this yellow tinge to the envelope. And so it was just kind of that surreal, like, is this real life? Is this going to be how life is from now on, that we have to take these special precautions with our mail? But then time went on, and had a lot of great experiences. Obviously, September 11th and then the anthrax attacks kind of defined our group's experience. But then we went through January, so through kind of that first full semester, and so our graduation was the first week or two in January, and then we went back home to Brookings, or I did, and then everyone went back to their home school for that second semester of junior year. But our English teacher had a comment for us that I think any experience really at some level, but any transformational experience, this quote rings true with me, is that she would say to us in kind of a stark way at first, a challenging way, you can never go home. Not in a, like, I'm going to kidnap you and you're not allowed to go home, but you can never go home. Like, home will not be the same. Because you've experienced this, and your friends back at your home high school have experienced it in their own way, you're forever changed, they're forever changed, you'll never be exactly the same. And so that's kind of what growing up is, in some sense. We just had a more traumatic way of going about it. But yeah, I guess I always knew that I was going to go away and have this experience, and my friends back home were going to still be at Brookings High School, and I was going to come back. I mean, I thought the main point of that was I wasn't going to make the basketball team, because I'd missed basketball season or something. Like, I thought that was going to be the main change in my life. But it was much more transformational, much more faith-building, much more embedded into a sense of public service, of public duty, that when someone asks you to go back to the Capitol building on September 12th, you say yes. When you're called to serve, you say yes. So the rest of my story is I went to Notre Dame and tried to do Air Force ROTC, but had a medical issue that got medically disqualified. And I said, God has that kind of that often thing of one door closes, another one opens. Well, I had a rule that I wasn't dating any of my fellow cadets, because I was a cadet. I was going to take it seriously. I wasn't going to date any of the female ROTC cadets. But once I wasn't in the program anymore, that girl over there looks pretty attractive. I never thought of her that way. So I asked a Notre Dame gal out on a date, and that's my wife now. And so she's an Air Force, she's at the guard base now as an Air Force JAG officer. So I married into military service rather than serving myself. But yeah, so she did one tour of duty in Afghanistan. So it kind of comes full circle of the September 11th experience and all the perils our country faced in Afghanistan, the ups and downs with that war. But she did 5 months there as a JAG officer. But yeah, I kind of ran through some of the highlights and adventures, but I'm always curious what groups are thinking about in kind of a faith-based approach or just a historical approach. But I'd just open it up for any Q&A at this point. Hopefully I didn't filibuster too long, as we say in the Senate. Okay. Yeah, Kim's usually good at giving me the red light to shut up. So, but yeah, and like I said, I've got copies of the book for everybody, and if I've got enough for everybody in the room, and maybe some leftovers for Kim to give to anybody that is just watching online or whatnot.
So at what point did you have time to sit down and write the book?
So I wrote the book in, that's kind of tied to, because I didn't go to field training the summer after my sophomore year in college. I would have been set to go to Air Force field training to become an Air Force officer. When I got a medical disqualification for that, I kind of had an open summer, and I got a government internship in Pierre, and there's not a lot to do in Pierre. So I'm not a big hunting, fishing guy, which I guess I could have done in the summer internship in Pierre, but yeah, I basically kind of combined what the journal I had been keeping into chapters and into the storytelling of my experience. And so it took me basically 2 summers to write the book while I was in college. And so yeah, it's kind of fun to look back now as a time capsule of where my mind was in my college years, coming fresh off of this experience. But yeah, so writing the book was kind of a cathartic experience of getting all of those ideas out and researching to fill in some of the gaps, because your own memory is only so good, but you talk to your other page friends, or you literally consult the congressional record to who said what when, and how did those senators have this dialogue about the attacks or things like that. So it was a good kind of research project and just personal history. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Have you stayed in contact with some of your fellow pages?
Yes, so I would say we're still a good group. Nowadays it's kind of the group text and things like that, but also during COVID was a new world historical event that got us back into the Zoom calls. So everyone was kind of lonely during that time period, was kind of looking for those interpersonal interactions, so we had a few of those calls set up. And yeah, like I've mentioned Jason Frericks a few times. He's done state legislature. I've done Minnehaha County Commission, so we stay in touch a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely a bonded group. That, again, the analogy is to sometimes military service, this band of brothers, of the people that went through the same experience as you. There's no one else that can kind of relate on that level. So you stay in touch with a few of them for sure, just because you have that bond. And yeah, we frequently send out emails and texts and well wishes September 11th every year. That's my group. At least once a year we're reconnecting, and at this stage we're kind of in the fun stage of the year where most of the emails are I had another kid or I got married. We're in this kind of celebratory phase of life, of entering midlife, and many folks are in government service, or a couple, like I said, did military service. So yeah, it's a group that is pretty well defined, but I think the type of people that want to go be a page in the first place are kind of like those people. But I think for our group, it's a special attitude towards public service. So it's always good to see what people were doing. Like, for example, one of my friends, he's from Montana, and he was in the Biden administration in the Commerce Department as a kind of a mid-level appointee and whatnot. So there's a few of us that are still kind of have ties to politics or to Washington, D.C., and so it's fun to see where everybody's going in their careers. But yep, it's a good group of people.
How has it shaped your view of public service and working with people that may have differing views? Not as a commissioner,
Yeah.
because I know that, but how does it shape how you see working with different groups?
Yeah, I guess it's foundational to me in the sense of that I take it seriously. Politics isn't just a game or something to be played with and to not do your homework. When you have an attack like September 11th that is going to lead to sending people overseas to a military conflict, that should be humbling and not. And so I think we have some political leaders today that and some of the political dialogue on both sides just seems like it's this game that we're playing, and that can I score points against the blue team or the red team, and it's not really grounded in this is serious public policy that affects people's lives. But sadly, that perspective is kind of boring, and it takes doing the homework. And how does this math work, or how does this procedure of the federal government work? And sometimes those can be the boring tasks. and they don't make for good TikTok videos and sound bites. And so actually doing the homework and doing the work is kind of what I think is kind of your first duty, and the basic sign of patriotism. Like, do you take your patriotism seriously? Are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to question some of your own assumptions and wrestle with the trade-offs of public policy? And so that's kind of shaped my outlook on it. So sometimes when I see folks that I don't think are taking it seriously or willing to do the hard work, like I've had my run-ins with the state legislature this past session. I'll be frank with this group, we're friends by now. I don't think this was our strongest legislative session in a while. There's some weird things happen, like when you change governors midstream. That's a challenging thing, and I think Governor Roden's a good guy. I can give you another part of the rest of my story. Is I was also a intern in Pierre. So I did the Page deal in Washington, D.C., and then I was an intern for Dave Knutson, who is a Senate Majority Leader on the Republican side in Pierre. So I got to be a Republican servant as well in Pierre. And that was when Scott Heideprim was the Democratic leader, and he had 15 senators Democrats, and Dave Knutson had 20 senators Republicans. So they're basically evenly matched, and you had to see political compromise to get things done. And now it's 32 Republicans in the Senate and 3 Democrats. And so when you don't really have a strong two-party system, you end up just fighting amongst each other, and it's very dysfunctional. But yeah, so there's definitely some room for improvement in Pierre. But when I was a Senate intern in Pierre, Larry Roden was the House Majority Leader, stand-up guy. I had nothing but good experiences with him from being kind of behind the scenes, and very professional guy, somebody that's willing to, take on policy things seriously. We had our disagreements during this legislative session as he was changing some tax code that would affect counties. So as a county commissioner, I felt it was my duty to represent my institution and go back and forth with him a little bit. But again, respectful and disagreeing on policy, not on personal things. So yeah, we'll see what next legislative session brings. But now I'm in the trenches of the actual policy making, not just a page or an intern. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the people that served with you as a page. Now we know a lot more about trauma and how it affects people. Do you know if there was any residual trauma or anything that those young people had to deal with later on, and now they recognize that it was from that time?
Well, and I think that's probably a good place to bring up some of our conversations during COVID, because I think that was a new generational trauma to the world when we're all hunkered down and worried about an illness that could kill us or could kill our relatives, and just that lack of connection. So some of those conversations I think did trudge up, what were the, I don't know that any of us are, I'm not going to play armchair psychiatrist if any of us have true like a PTSD from that time in Washington, D.C., but definitely we could relate to some of those symptoms if we don't diagnostically have them. But some of those conversations during the COVID era did kind of say, how did you feel during this time, and how does it compare to now? I do remember the U.S. Senate did get a group of like counselors for us during that fall, and we had kind of a group session, and one of the comments was, this just sucks because we didn't ask for this. We didn't there's one thing about signing up and knowing what you're getting into, and we thought this was just going to be this great civic experience, and so it just didn't meet expectations. And so there's kind of that why me aspect of it. And then the flip side of that coin is, well, September 11th could have been a lot worse for us. Why? So that survivor's guilt. Why not me? Why wasn't the first plane headed for the Capitol building while we were in the building? And so that makes you struggle. And I guess myself and some of my other fellow pages, I think we pushed it into that theological faith category and wrestled with that a little bit, and I think actually came out the other side stronger. So everybody reacts to those types of events differently. I look back on it as a foundational event that I think actually made me stronger mentally, physically, everything, that in some sense, it'd be odd to say I'm thankful for it happening, but if that event was going to happen, I was thankful I was in the place I was and was alongside other people that are now just kind of have that common bond for our life, and it was just foundational to who I am today.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, thank you, Kim. Thank you all.